Hello, this is Spartan Commander, and this is the 1031st YouTube video that I've put onto our channel. It's just to say I'm going to do something that we've never done on this channel before. And I'm going to talk to you about the Battle of Edgehill, which is a battle that was fought on the 23rd of October 1642 in the English Civil War. And this is the only battlefield that has actually got documented evidence about ghosts being seen on the battlefield after the battle. In fact, this battle was actually fought every night after the battle in the sky above the battlefield, where the ghosts of the dead soldiers there were seen fighting. You could hear the cries of dying and wounded men, the hooves, the horses' hooves, and of course the cannon and musket fire as well. And as I say, a lot of battlefields in England are said to be haunted, but this is the only battlefield that has actually had a royal commission and formal inquiry actually at the time, and it was said that the battle was being replayed in the sky every night after the battle. And it was kind of quite a sobering experience. Imagine walking through the battlefield after the battle and all of a sudden hearing cannon fire. Imagine that. Months after the battlefield, all of a sudden hearing cannon fire and looking up at the sky and seeing the flashes of gunfire there. Okay, so just before I talk about the actual haunting, if you like, I'll give you a bit of background about the battle. So King Charles I, he believed that he was put on the throne by God, and that God is the only person that he needed to answer to. So he thought he could spend money and do whatever he liked. But of course he came into conflict with the Parliament there, the elected members by the people. And they very often stopped him doing exactly what he wanted. And, because he thought that he only had to answer to God, he kind of resented the Parliament. And after years and years of arguments and disrespect by kind of both, if you like, the king raised his banner on the 25th of August, 1642, and basically declared war on his own Parliament. Okay, now the first skirmish of the English Civil War was actually in Worcester, but it was actually a skirmish. Okay, the first pitched battle was fought at Edgehill in Warwickshire, okay, on October the 23rd, 1642. All right, and the royalist troops had around about 14,000 men, and the Parliament troops had about 15,000 men. Now the royalists got to the battlefield first and took the higher ground there, so straight away they had the advantage. Okay, now obviously this was the first pitched battle of the war, so both sides took ages to kind of get the deployment right of both armies, and the first shot wasn't fired until 1 p.m. in the afternoon. Okay, so the battle started, the first pitched battle of the English Civil War started at Edgehill at 1 p.m. Okay, now amongst the royalist troops was a man called Prince Rupert. Okay, now he was what I would class as a flamboyant character. He was one of these people that, look at me, I'm kind of great, like, and if you climbed a mountain kind of thing, he'd climbed a higher mountain. You get what I mean about this guy? He was, he just thought himself so great. Anyway, with the downhill advantage that the royalist troops had, he led the royalist cavalry in a downhill cavalry charge and smashed into the parliamentary cavalry, okay, and the parliamentary cavalry broke. And so what a massive advantage there. The royalist cavalry had broken the parliamentary cavalry there, and just think the advantage that the royalists could have. But Prince Rupert was so hot-headed that him and his cavalry just started to chase the parliamentary cavalry away from the battlefield, and they just carried on chasing them and chasing them, and never came back to the battlefield until after dark. So they were never seen on the battlefield at all, after that. They just returned to their camp after dark. So Rupert and his cavalry were chasing a routing parliamentary cavalry for hours and hours, getting further and further away from the battlefield. So the advantage that the royalists gained by breaking the parliamentary cavalry was never ever kind of made the best of, if you see what I mean. So this left the cannons and the musketeers and the units of pikemen crashing into each other there on the battlefield, and for hours and hours they kept firing, shooting, hacking at each other with pikes and swords. And then gradually, as night began to fall, both armies were exhausted and they kind of disengaged as darkness fell. Okay, and a lot of wounded that were on the battlefield were left overnight, and a lot of them died from their wounds. Now, of course, the next day, the king wanted to move his army to another part of the country, and the parliamentary troops wanted to move their army to another part of the country. So just some shallow graves were dug, and some of the bodies were just put into the shallow graves. But the majority of the bodies were just left where the men fell. Okay, so both armies, the parliamentary and the royalists, just left, and there were hundreds of bodies just left on the battlefield there. Okay, so that was on the 23rd of October 1642. Okay, about approximately a month later, 4 shepherds were walking across the battlefield, and all of a sudden they heard muskets being fired, the flash of cannons, the sound of hooves, drums beating, and looked up at the sky, and the battle was actually being replayed in the sky. It was so, they could see the people so clear, they could see people's faces so clear, they could see all the action of the battle being replayed in the sky. Now, I mean, imagine if someone said that to you, what would you think? You know, I mean, would you believe that? Anyway, they stood there for what they considered to be around about 3 hours watching the battle, and then they went straight back to the village that they came from called Coynton. And they went straight to the Justice of the Peace, Mr. Wood, and they went to the church minister, Mr. Marshall, and told them exactly what they've seen. Now, rather than dismissing the shepherds as being drunk or making this up, these 2 men believed them, and the next night they went out to the battlefield, and get ready for this, there was the battle being fought again in the sky. And once again, they could see the clear banners, the clear faces, all the sounds of the battles there, and it was like they were watching a replay of the battle. And, you know, it was just unbelievable, really. I mean, nothing ever had been seen or documented about anything like this before. And these 2 men then, when they saw, and they took some dignitaries from the village as well to watch it, so there were lots of witnesses watching this, what was happening in the sky. They then went to rode to where King Charles was camped and told him exactly what they've seen. Now, Charles knew these men and believed them and trusted them. And so what he did was he wanted to launch what maybe is the first royal commission formal inquiry ever launched in this country. And he got his most trusted officer, Colonel Lewis Kirk, and 6 other trusted officers to go to Edge Hill, and their instructions were to kind of find out exactly what was going on here, to get to the bottom of this business. So Colonel Lewis Kirk and his 6 officers, trusted officers, they went to Edge Hill, and they actually went that evening, they went to the actual battlefield, and there they saw the battle for themselves. Now, Colonel Lewis Kirk and these 6 officers had actually participated in the battle, and they recognised a lot of the soldiers, officers and soldiers, that were killed there fighting in the sky in this battle. They could actually see their faces so clearly. And one of the people that they saw was Sir Edmund Verney. Now, Sir Edmund Verney was the king's bearer, a king's colours bearer. Okay, so he was bearing the king's colours. And at one stage, the parliamentary troops broke through the royalist lines, and Sir Edmund Verney was surrounded by parliament troops who demanded that he gave them the king's colours. Apparently, Sir Edmund Verney said, "My life is my own, but this is the king's colours." and he wouldn't give it to them. And it is said that he cut down 16 parliamentary troops before he fell. And I just thought you might find that interesting. And then later on in the battle, when the royalists recaptured the king's colours, right, get ready for this, Sir Edmund Verney's severed hand was still holding the staff that held the colours, and they had to break his fingers to actually free his severed hand from the staff that were holding the king's colours. And they both, the Colonel Kirk there and the officers, they all recognised Sir Edmund Verney there, and they were watching him fighting and being killed in the battle in the sky that they'd actually witnessed themselves in the real battle. So imagine that. I mean, could you? I mean, I don't know what your beliefs are, or you believe in the afterlife, or whether you believe in ghosts. But what they were actually watching was a replay of that battle, and they recognised things that were going on in the battle that actually did happen there. And it is said that, you know, when some intense activity has happened in places, very often that intense activity, like an intense battle, can leave an imprint on the land, and in this case in the sky. And so they witnessed it, and you know, they watched it, and they then had to write up a report on obviously what they'd seen. The 6 officers and Colonel Kirk there write up exactly what they'd seen. And so the ghosts battles that they watched was actually documented there. So they then went to the king with all their evidence of what they'd seen, and the king believed them. And as I say, it's the first ever documented king's commission of a formal inquiry of actually seeing ghosts in after a battle. Okay, so I just thought you might find that interesting. So the king, trusting the people that he sent there, believed them, and the actual written evidence of what they saw is actually in the public office now, that you can actually, where they keep all the records of the country, like, are in the public records office, and you can actually read exactly what they actually saw there. And as I say, the king believed them, and the villagers and the townspeople that were there, they'd go up there, and this battle was being replayed every single night in the sky. The ghosts of dead men there were in, you could see in the sky. Now, just to let you know that the villagers and the townspeople around that area became frightened by this, and they believed it was something from God had been sent to them, that something wasn't right with this battle. So what they decided to do was to collect all the dead bodies that were on the battlefield. Okay, so remember, there were hundreds of dead bodies just left on the battlefield, and they dug graves for them, and brought the vicar or the church minister up, and all the dead troops that hadn't had a burial were then given a Christian burial. And from that night on, there was no more battles in the sky. It was kind of like the dead spirits were restless, and they couldn't rest because their bodies hadn't been given a Christian burial. That's what the thinking was at the time. And after they had a Christian burial, they were kind of the battles in the sky stopped, and so that's what was thinking. But the thing is, that's not the end of the story, see, because in the Second World War, an army base was built close to the battlefield, and I believe there were some American troops there, and they one night heard cannon fire and rifle fire and the sound of drums, and they stood to in their base because they thought that maybe the Germans had dropped paratroopers close to them or something like that. And when they heard the actual firing, like, you know, and that is documented as well, that they heard firing, they saw flashes of cannons, they heard drums and things like that. And of course, being in the Second World War, as I say, they thought maybe there might be some German paratroopers or something that had been dropped in there. And then in 1960, British troops at that same army camp reported hearing drums, cannon fire, rifle fire, horses galloping and things like that, and that is also documented there. So it seems that that even though the main battle that we're seeing fought in the sky every night, one after the other, had stopped, but there still seems to be maybe the residue of the battle, if you like, the ghosts, if you believe in that type of thing, were still kind of there. And even to the modern visitor to the battlefield now, some people are reporting seeing people in Civil War uniforms, both on horseback and walking across the battlefield, that are just walking across and then all of a sudden disappear from their sight. So, as I say, I'm not sure, whatever your belief is, whether you believe in the afterlife or ghosts or whether you don't, something very, very strange happened at Edge Hill after that battle there. And with the documented evidence from these trusted people, and bear in mind, it wasn't just Colonel Lewis Kirk and the 6 trusted officers and the justice of the peace and the church minister that saw this. There was villagers and townsfolk, and people came from other places as well to watch this battle being replayed in the sky. So there wasn't, I don't think you could say that it was mass hysteria or anything like that. Something very strange was happening there. And as I say, there are battlefields up and down the UK where people say they see ghosts and things like that, to this day. But as I say, Edge Hill is the only royal documented, if you like, case of ghosts being seen after the actual battle. And I just thought you might find this quite interesting to hear about this, that you might not have heard before. But could you imagine walking across a battlefield at night, and all of a sudden you seeing the battle actually being replayed in the sky above you? I mean, I just couldn't think how I would react to that, and I just wonder how all of you would think. I suppose these days, a lot of people would pull out their mobile phones and start filming it, so you'd actually have kind of film evidence. But as you can see, the Royal Commission there, with that formal inquiry, definitely said that they watched the battle being replayed in the sky by ghosts of the dead. So please leave your thoughts in the comments about that, because I'd be very, very interested to hear what all of you think about this. And as I say, I thought you might find this interesting. I read an article on this last week in a magazine, and I just thought it might be interesting to put on our YouTube channel here, something completely different from what we usually do. And as I say, if you wanted to research this yourself, and the public office there, the public records office has got this so that people can see the documented evidence of actual ghosts, or a replay of the battle happening in the sky night after night after night. And as I say, the intensity of the first battle of the English Civil War, I wonder if it kind of left an imprint, if you know what I mean, actually on the battlefield there that was being shown. And just imagine hearing the cannon fire there as you walk across the battlefield today. Imagine that if you were walking across Edge Hills today and you heard the cannon fire there, how frightening that could actually be, couldn't it? Especially if you saw the troops there firing their muskets and things like that, and hearing the cries of the wounded there as well would be very scary. And I just thought I'd add these cannons here from medieval Total War II, just to kind of give you a bit of a feeling of the cannons going off and things like that, and to add a little bit more authenticity to this this video. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Please put your thoughts in the comments. It's the first time I've ever done this type of thing, and I look forward to hear what you think.